I'm Deputy Mayor Michael Thompson, Chair of the City of Toronto's Economic and Community Development Committee. I'm pleased to be part of the 14th edition of the Toronto Global Forum and to be here with you to help lead the second Toronto Partnership Symposium. Toronto has been a key sponsor of this forum since it began, and we're glad to help host these virtual sessions in Toronto. This morning, we will focus on topics related to our Latin American Bilateral Trade Initiative, also known as LABD. The city and our councillor community established LABD 5 years ago to inform and empower the Latin American business owners and professionals who live and work in the Greater Toronto Area. LABD is strengthening Toronto's economy by drawing upon and sharing the combined knowledge of our dynamic Latin American businesses and our councillor core community. Through conferences, information, and networking sessions like our meeting today, the LABD initiative allows us to gain insight from our LABD members and in return to provide them with professional support for their work. Today's panelists, which I have the opportunity to share some time with in a moment, I'd like to welcome them and the LABD members who have joined us virtually today. Our first panel of influential leaders is Mr. Lucas Martinez. He is co-founder and co-CEO of Talent.com, a worldwide operation with 300 employees based in 6 countries, including 100 IT professional consultants working in Medellin, Colombia. In 1 year, Talent.com has grown from 40 million visitors to its website per month to 80 million. This makes it the 3rd largest job search website on the planet behind Indeed.com and LinkedIn. The company plans to double its size by the end of 2021. Our next panelist is Rick Savoni. Rick is Vice President in Global Government Relations for Aurora Cannabis Inc. Rick oversees Aurora's relationships with governments around the world, helping its governmental colleague create legislative and regulatory framework that enables greater patient access to medicinal cannabis products. He's also the chair of the board of Cannabis Council of Canada. Over the course of his career, he has developed deep government relationship experiences, most recent as the Director General for Global Affairs Canada. Prior to that, Rick was Canada's ambassador to Brazil. Our next panelist is Mark Romoff. Mark is President and CEO of Canadian Council for Public-Private Partnership. The Council's mission is to collaborate with all levels of governments, Indigenous communities, and the private sector to establish smart, innovative, and sustainable approaches to developing and maintaining public infrastructure. Previously, Mark was founding president and CEO of the Ontario Centres of Excellence, Canada's leading innovation, technology, commercialization, and entrepreneurship development organization. Over his 25-year career with the Government of Canada, Mark has served as Executive Director in the Department of Industry and as a Senior Diplomat in the Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade in Nigeria, Mexico, Malaysia, Japan, and the United States. Our next panelist is Dave Fox. Dave leads Crisis 24's, America's pre-incident consulting team. The team provides a range of complex investigational support in the areas of regulatory compliance, security risk management, travel management, business continuity, resilience, and crisis management capability development. Prior to joining Crisis 24, Dave was the CSO for Irving Oil, a privately owned international energy company where he was responsible for intelligent-led risk mitigation strategies and the development of global security guideline procedures and policies. This followed a 27-year career with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, where he led serious crime criminal investigation, financial, internet, and cyber facilitated crime investigation. I welcome all of the panelists and thank you for sharing your time and your expertise with us. So let's begin with this exciting panelist, and let's start with the questions. My first question is to Lucas Martinez. The question, Lucas, is can you please comment on the evolution of the labor market in Latin America, and comment on the skill development and the hiring practices that are taking place in Latin America. Lucas?
Michael, hi everyone. Thank you very much for having me here, and I hope everyone is well at home in these difficult times. So in regards to your question, I think I'd love to share a bit more about my experience. And as you mentioned very well, we are a job search website, and when we first started, we had no money. We had no money, and we needed software developers to help us build the platform because we are in 79 countries. In order to serve all this world, we needed a lot of software engineers. And we started to look at different places all around the world, and it was difficult because first in Canada, here in Montreal, where we're based, it was tough to find people. It was expensive. In Asia, the time zone didn't make sense for us. And then we started to look in Latin America. I'm lucky enough that I speak Spanish because my parents are from Spain. So that's when we started to look at Latin America. We first looked at Venezuela, where we kind of we were lucky because there was a lot of inflation there, and we were able to actually get to know the labor market there a bit better. And that was in 2010. And that's when we realized that, and started to get to know about universities in Latin America were extremely good, and people that would come out from those IT degrees in general were very well trained and ready to work, and for us at a very cost-effective price. So that helped us tremendously. And then what happened is, obviously, during the descent of what happened in Venezuela, we lost a lot of people because they were leaving for a better future in other countries. And we looked around, and this is when we started to get to know a lot better Colombia, which is somehow a similar country to Venezuela in terms of geography and distance from Canada, very accessible to us. And that's when we really started to again realize how people there in Latin America in general, and in Colombia, obviously, because that's where we went, how well trained they were, and how ready to work they were. And it's been extremely easy for us to be able to attract people there. Now, obviously, we're a bit bigger here in Canada as well, and you could say, why don't you hire people here? But the reality, it takes us 5 months sometimes to hire 2 or 3 software engineers here in Canada, and we're a job search website. So we saw the opportunity in Colombia, and in less than 2 years, we managed to hire more than 100 people. And now, by the end of next year, we should be 300 just in the city of Medellin. And we're not shying away from this, because it starts just with IT. But the reality is, people are extremely hungry. The possibilities to find work opportunities are limited in Colombia. So we get plentiful of great applications coming from amazing universities that somehow are similar or same level to Ivy League universities in North America. So when you look at University of Antioquia, or University of Nacional in Bogota, or even others, these people are extremely smart and ready to work. So we can attest right now that we are going to see, at least for us, and we see other companies, and in this post-COVID world, an explosion in the service industry in countries such as Colombia. And that's because people are ready to work from home a lot more, and companies are going to realize that it's a lot more cost effective, same time zone, same culture, and with amazing training, and these people available to work. So I believe that we are already seeing this evolution right now. I think Colombia per se is already becoming a new tech hub in Latin America, but it's not going to stop there. It's going to go into call centers and other related service industry jobs, and it's not going to stop. So it's promising.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Lucas. My next question is for Rick. Rick, do you foresee any increased opportunities for Canadian companies in Latin America, in the cannabis sector? How do you see that playing out for Canadian companies?
Well, I think that over the next 5 years, say 3 to 5 years, we're going to see growth, cannabis sector specifically, around the world. What we're seeing right now is there are a few markets internationally where we're seeing medical cannabis becoming much more accepted as a prescription and as a medicine, being recognized by professionals around the world. Especially with next week's developments in the United States, I think we're going to see a monumental shift where we're going to see that medical cannabis is going to become much more of a much more standard part of a medical regime that practitioners, medical doctors, pharmacists recognize and integrate into healthy lifestyles. There can be no denying the type of relief and the type of benefits that medical cannabis generates for many patients, and I think around the world we're starting to see that type of benefit. In Latin America specifically, we're especially when you balance the public policy needs of the project that we've undertaken here in Canada, which was to encourage a healthy, safe environment for recreational cannabis, in addition to a legal, safe environment for medical cannabis. I think that in Latin America, we're going to see that development happen as naturally as it's happened here in Canada. That medical cannabis is already something that's being integrated in a number of markets. I was in Brazil very recently, and in other markets we're seeing in Mexico. We're seeing that the markets are moving very quickly toward embracing medical cannabis as a reality that many clients use. So I do expect that growth is going to continue, and our partnership with firms in that region, not just Aurora's, but all Canadian companies, I think is really very promising. I think we see that this is a field where someone's know-how, experience, and skills at being able to grow in a high-quality, secure environment are highly valued. And so there are a significant number of partners down in Latin America and in South America that look to Canadian partners with a great degree of both admiration, confidence, and curiosity about what kind of opportunities are available in the future. So I'm quite confident about what partnerships exist for us. We currently have an investment in Uruguay. It's a very interesting investment because Uruguay happens to be one of the few markets around the world where medical and recreational cannabis are recognized. So with Canada, we're in a very small club. But we have a facility there, and we're one of the biggest foreign investors in the country, and definitely one of the biggest Canadians. So that's the type of partnership that I think is going to be beneficial and profitable for our shareholders, and beneficial for medical patients going forward.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. The next question is for Mark. Mark, what are the key advantages for Canadian companies seeking to diversify their market into Latin America?
Thanks, Michael, and good morning. And I'm delighted to be here. I really do appreciate the invitation. As you mentioned at the outset, Michael, I represent the Canadian Council for Public-Private Partnerships, And this is really all about infrastructure and the need to bring smarter, more innovative approaches to how we invest in infrastructure in order to get the very best outcomes from that investment, and also to enhance the quality of life. I mean, for us, obviously, first and foremost for Canadians, but I think for countries around the world, investing in infrastructure is critically important. It's interesting because the Global Infrastructure Hub a couple of years ago identified the global deficit in infrastructure to be in excess of $94 trillion. That's an unbelievable figure, and I can promise you that it's probably a little bit higher in 2020. But the reality is that countries have to invest in infrastructure because we know that it creates jobs, it grows the economy, it enables countries and their people to be more productive and generally globally competitive. So it's really important that countries do that. And that's our connect with Latin America, because Canadian companies are working very closely with partners around the world and are keenly interested in sharing the Canadian experience. And so we're very fortunate in Canada in that we have a very strong track record in infrastructure investment, and particularly the use of public-private partnerships. So for Canada, we have developed very strong relationships with a number of countries in the region with the intent of sharing our experiences, both our successes and the challenges that we've confronted and how we've dealt with them. And we are very keenly interested, as I say, in sharing those experiences and hopefully enabling countries that are keenly interested in also mounting public-private partnership initiatives to do that successfully. From a Canadian company perspective, we have a lot of expertise. Our firms have a lot of expertise gained here at home. And so they are very keenly interested in competing for projects in countries in the Latin American region. And first and foremost, in identifying partners in those countries with whom they can collaborate in order to add our expertise to the consortium that are bidding these projects in countries. But not only that, we're keenly interested in taking those partnerships back to Canada to enable us here in Canada to be more competitive, as well as collectively Canadian companies, Latin American companies to work together in order to bid these projects successfully in third markets. So there's a real opportunity here for Canada to diversify, and Canadian business to diversify its global interests, and Latin America is a key partner in that agenda. And quite frankly, what makes public-private partnerships so successful is the fact that that model forces innovation and competitiveness into the process. So that's key, and I think when we think about Latin America, along the lines of their interest in becoming more innovative and competitive, there's an opportunity here for Canadian companies to really strengthen our connection and our presence in Latin America. And I think that, and in fact, at the moment, we're working, as I mentioned earlier, very closely with a number of countries. And I'm happy to run through that list if and when you'd like. But the reality is that we're all facing big infrastructure deficits, but we're also challenged fiscally at the same time as citizens in all of the countries of the region and Canada are looking for infrastructure to be built faster, better, and cheaper. And that really does put the onus on innovative approaches. And in the Canadian context, that's meant more use of public-private partnerships, and it's particularly important now as countries around the world are working hard at efforts to recover their economies in a COVID environment, and infrastructure has a central role to play in enabling that recovery to take place. So it's a very timely opportunity for Canada to connect into the region because we have put so much emphasis on investing in infrastructure. As you know, the government of Canada has an Investing in Canada plan, which initially allocated $186 billion over 10 years to investing in infrastructure, and provinces and territories have earmarked equally significant amounts of money aimed at tackling this infrastructure deficit. It is so important to us, and I know it's a shared perspective with the countries right through the Latin American region.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. You know, I see a theme here, and it's interesting when Lucas talks a little bit about Latin American market, labor market, and the skills development, the hiring practices, and so on, which is ties into the opportunities that Rick spoke about, and obviously it's really important in terms of making this connection. And the opportunities for cannabis and the medicinal cannabis market is huge. And Mark, you just addressed the issue around the public-private partnership and infrastructure. And now we are going to obviously hear from Dave, where he will talk about manufacturing, the companies and those opportunities in supply chain. So, Dave, my question to you is, can you provide us with a perspective on the supply chain related challenges that companies should be aware of when considering manufacturing opportunities in Mexico and other Latin American countries?
Great. Thank you, Michael, for having me. It's a pleasure to join the panel. And being the security guy, I'm not here to tell people they can't do things. It's more my role to kind of raise and highlight some of the challenges in ensuring that people try to operate safely and securely in other areas of the world which are not the same as at home. So I'll jump into it. The threats differ. So depending on the country, the state, the region, and even the stretch of road you're looking at, in general terms, there are many overarching supply chain and security risks. So let me begin with the general insecurity associated with road travel in the region throughout Latin America and Mexico. And looking at Mexico specifically, there's a distinct lack of security along many of their major highways. There are long stretches of road with little police presence. They either cut through areas of the country under dispute by various criminal organizations, or form part of key routes for the trafficking of illicit substances to the U.S., and also for the movement of contraband south to Mexico and Latin America for money laundering and other purposes. So transiting through these areas carries significant risk for corporations operating in the region of cargo theft, targeted attacks, or even cases of mistaken identity. So and additional risks include some of the collateral damages or being caught in crossfire amongst criminal groups or between criminal groups and state security trying to maintain law and order. So really you're inadvertently at risk sometimes of being at the wrong place at the wrong time. And and another example would be Colombia, where in rural areas of the country where they may have prescriptive groups in addition to organized crime, where they've had armed groups which have a strong presence, and they've actually had set up checkpoints which are legal, obviously. And at these checkpoints, a variety of situations can involve everything from asking for illegal road tolls, which brings into whether you would pay to cross those road tolls and the implications of that, to extortion, to potential kidnapping of drivers, to the theft of cargo. So in July of this year, illegal armed groups, have been imposing strict quarantines and curfews throughout the rural parts of Colombia, threatening and even in a couple of instances killing those that did not comply. So and another prominent risk is cargo theft and robbery. So usually opportunistic in nature, but it can be targeted, and it could involve insider complicity, often involving items that can be resold in the black market, including food, clothing, household goods, electronics, other parts, auto parts, and other supplies. During the initial months of the border closures between Mexico and the U.S. earlier this year, Crisis 24 has witnessed and observed a marked increase in cargo theft of food and basic hygiene products during those initial periods. And also from a cargo perspective, is corporations need to be wary of the co-opting of legitimate cargo to smuggle drugs is always a concern. So most drugs that cross the border into the U.S. do so through legal ports of entry. So there is a notable exposure across the region, whether via road, air, or even maritime transport, where company logistics chains are compromised with criminal groups for the concealment and trafficking of drugs and other illegal goods. And this can have severe impacts on an organization's reputation, their brand, and it may result in legal challenges and potentially the loss of CTPAT certifications and privileges such as the expedited processing at the U.S. border. So, and I guess lastly would be, the often overlooked is the monitoring for and the implications of civil unrest throughout the region. So, incidents of civil unrest and protests in countries across Latin America have increasingly involved the use of, rudimentary blockades. So, for example, sit-ins or burning tires on key thoroughfares and highways. This has been proven to be a very successful tactic, as a relatively small group of protesters can demonstrate a greater impact on their prospective governments and attract more attention to their message. This type of activity has been seen in Honduras, Mexico, Ecuador, and Chile. And the risks to corporations and their employees from injury to drivers is the potential destruction or theft of merchandise for transiting the wrong place at the wrong time, where protests escalate. At a minimum, incidents of civil unrest and is the risk of severe delays, potential failures to meet contractual obligations, and the spoiling of perishable items. For example, in Nicaragua in June of 2018, blockades associated with the protests against President Daniel Ortega resulted in 6,000 trucks becoming stranded. And this is important because corporations operating in the region as supply chain security resilience considerations, because Nicaragua's location in the Central American Isthmus constitutes a vulnerable bottleneck and unavoidable land route between Panama and North America. So, thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much for that. That's very helpful. I think it's really important to understand the market conditions and the associated risk. Looking at where you're investing, and I think it's obviously it's really important to have this information. Because in as much as you look at these markets and these opportunities in these markets, you also have to have a broader understanding as to the security component and the risk associated with respect to entering in these markets. It's not just a financial risk. There are other elements of risk. And thank you very much for describing and helping us to have a greater understanding of that. My next question is to Lucas. Lucas, what do you see as the most important differences that Canadian business leaders should understand about doing business in Latin America?
Well, I think what's very important to understand here is that it's, and I can attest here for the service industry because that's where I operate, right? I think that it's not as complicated as it seems. I remember when we wanted to launch in Latin America, and we said, okay, we need to launch operations. Everyone was like, guys, it's going to take you 6 months to launch something. You have to bribe people. It's going to be complex. The reality was a different experience. I think we need to move beyond stereotypes. It took us a month with the help of ProColombia in Toronto to actually open a full entity in Medellin in Colombia. And it was actually extremely cheap. So I think this is the first burden that service companies here, at least in Canada and the US, need to understand, is that it's relatively easy. And right now we're opening in Brazil as well for sales related purposes. And again, it's becoming, it used to be a long time to open a company, at least 6 months, and now they're decreasing it to at least 3 months. So we should be able to operate quite effectively and faster there pretty soon. So I think these are the first elements. It's try to understand that it's not what it seems to be. It's a lot easier to create a company than even I thought before. The second is education, and I'd like to rebound on this. And I know I talked about it a bit before, but I think today we are literally surfing an amazing wave of great talent. And I think there's a lot of companies that do not know that there's such amazing talent in Latin America. Again, it's extremely difficult to enter in the best universities in Latin America. A bit the same way that it is extremely difficult to get at University of Toronto, McGill, Harvard, or other Ivy Leagues. And I think that's something that really helped us a lot, because today the guys who are running our machine learning today and all of our AI activities are Latin American. And they're amazing. They're smarter, way smarter than I am. And we've been able to work with them without actually having too much trouble, because there is not much competition. So I think we need to have a broader understanding of the region today in general. Like, get serious about Latin America. It is not normal that us as North Americans do not trade more than we are today with South America. We trade a lot with Mexico for obvious reasons, thanks to trade agreements, but with Latin America and South America in general is still very, very low. So I predict again, and it's gonna slowly, it's already happening, right? As I was mentioning, but it's gonna happen a bit more. And I'll give you an example. You know, when companies like Facebook or Google are saying that they will allow people to work from home today, you know, they don't want to pay $300,000 per year for a software engineer in San Francisco. That doesn't make sense to them anymore. So that's why they're allowing people also to get away from the Valley and create clusters in other places in the US. But that's going to open the door to different clusters all around Latin America as well, because they're on the same time zone and going to be able to snatch them. So I think we've seen companies such as Globant, BearsDev already developing a lot in Latin America and serving the US for IT purposes. But now we're going to see something else. We're going to see Colombia becoming the tech hub of Latin America, but we're also going to see other Latin American countries growing and extremely fast. And in this new world, I think we have no other choice as North Americans than to look at South America. Again, it takes me, I can hire one person maximum per month in Montreal as a software engineer, and I'm a job search website. That's how hard it is. And they demand a lot. They want to freelance and stuff. So I think that naturally we are, as entrepreneurs in the service industry, attracted to Latin America today, because I'm talking to my peers and then explaining our experience in Colombia, and everyone is baffled. So I think it creates a momentum, and that momentum is right now. And this, what happened with COVID in the last year now, is just an accelerator of things. Colombia was already growing. Latin America and the service industry in general were already growing. This is just going to accelerate things, and it's going to put a lot of pressure on local governments to make sure that they'll be able to train local people for the demand that is going to come their way. So I obviously the service industry is already the biggest of the three sectors in Latin America, but I foresee, at least in the short term, this to actually to exacerbate in a good way, I guess, here and have even more and more North American companies investing in the service industry in Latam.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that answer. And obviously, it pays to pay attention and to recognize opportunities and so on. And I think that's part of your presentation, and it's really helpful to recognize the differences that exist. Yes, but they don't potentially create a barrier, and I think that's really important for us to understand. I'm going to turn my next question to Rick. Rick, is the Latin American regulatory environment favorable for Canadian businesses? What should Canadian business, be most aware of about doing business there in Latin America?
Well, if you don't mind, Michael, I'm going to answer that question, and I'm going to tie into something that Lucas just said, because he I think, if you don't mind, because I think he said something. He said something that I think is very valuable for Canadians that want to do business in Latin America, and that is how important it is to understand what Latin Americans or people in South America or Latin America, what they think about Canadians, and the value of education, I think, is quite central there. It also ties back to something we heard Mark say a little bit earlier, talking about infrastructure. as we go forward in Latin America and in South America, my personal experience has been in Brazil, so which is half of the continent. But for Canadians that want to be successful in South America, I think they have to learn how to dance quite carefully, and it's not just the samba, but they have to learn how to project the education and the skills and the know-how that our market is well known around the world for and valued in South America for that. And at the same time, they have to put forward a good business proposal, but they have to be sensitive, I think, of what's going on right now, not just here in Canada. Of course, it's a global reality. We're at the point where public expenditure on things like infrastructure is clearly lacking, not just in South America, also here in Canada. And at the same time, there's a need for that type of investment, just as Mark said. And so the Canadians that go down there with that notion of, bringing their values with them, recognizing that we're all in this together, and having a long-term view, a long-term vision of the prospects of South America, the continent where, frankly, Canada has probably done least well than anywhere in the world, and it's really the continent next door. Is kind of surprising. If we bring all of those things together and have a good understanding, realization of what our potential is, have a long-term view, and understand that investment is going to pay off not only in profits, but in social dividends, that's going to bring populations up, that we're going to be able to share our experience and bring some of the know-how that exists in South America here to Canada, that this type of sharing equation is something that's highly valued in places like Sao Paulo and in Buenos Aires and Medellin and other places. These are very, very highly valued propositions that we can be part of.
Excellent, thank you. I mean, that's a great tie-in, and it's really important. And you talk about bringing values with them, and I think that's extremely important for us to respect and recognize, differences and so on, but at the same time appreciate them. And so I think that's extremely important. I'm going to now ask Mark the following question. Mark, do you see increased partnership opportunities for Canadian companies in Latin America post-COVID? And can you share any of the examples of Canadian companies teaming up with Latin American governments to build infrastructure?
Thanks for that question, Michael. I can tell you categorically that there is interest on the part of Canadian companies in increasing their footprint in the region. There's no doubt. And in fact, some of the points that have already been raised are really important at the outset to enable that to happen as it relates to infrastructure. Some of the key features of the Canadian approach to procuring infrastructure, which has really been the underlying tenets of our success, are around reliability of projects, predictability, transparency on the process for procurement, and also a fair and competitive process. These have really been factors that have enabled Canada to be successful in the infrastructure field, and it's what has been key to attracting the global players, and all of them are engaged in the Canadian infrastructure market because of those factors. So what's important for Canadian companies who would like to do business in the region, that the way in which infrastructure is procured shares some of those fundamental underpinnings. And I think what's interesting is that many of the countries in the region have been in regular contact with Canadian counterparts, and in particular with our own council, in order that we can share our experience. It doesn't mean that the way Canada does it is the way everyone else should do it, because it really is necessary to adapt the approach to infrastructure investment to local realities. In the same way that we learned at the outset how to do PPPs, P3s from the UK. But we had to, in that case too, recalibrate the process a little bit in order to make sure that it worked effectively here. So I think with that as backdrop, Canadian companies are keenly interested, and in fact are active already in countries like Chile, Mexico, and when you think about the Caribbean, in Puerto Rico. And in fact, those countries, along with El Salvador and Colombia, will actually be presenting projects at our conference, which we're holding virtually, of course, on November 17th to 19th. So clearly, there are significant infrastructure projects coming to market from countries in Latin America. They'll all be showcased at our conference in November. That's a shameless plug, of course. But the reality is that these countries recognize the importance of investing in infrastructure and want to make sure that the world is aware of the projects that are their biggest opportunity at the moment, in order that they can attract international competitive bidders. That's really critical. So I think that kind of messaging really is encouraging for Canadian companies, and you know, you would know many of our firms that are globally active. They include SNC-Lavalin, Stantec, WSP, others for sure, and it's those companies who are keenly interested, are enjoying some success in the region, and their success motivates other Canadian companies to really take a hard look at being equally successful in those markets. And that's why, again, I think any opportunity to showcase the commitment to infrastructure, the types of projects that are on the drawing board and moving ahead, and to look for the perspective of stakeholders around the world, and notably Canada, in terms of how they can structure those projects so that they come to market successfully, is critically important. So I'm very confident around the opportunity to build the Canada-Latin American connection as it relates to infrastructure, because the needs of these countries mirror the expertise in Canada. Most of our big infrastructure projects these days are in the area of transportation, notably urban transit. This is a huge global issue. The health sector, another one where Canada leads the way with procurement of hospitals, long-term healthcare facilities. These are just two examples of sectors that are critically important, and maybe even more so in a COVID and post-COVID environment. So again, I think Canadian companies have developed a base of expertise and a willingness to collaborate with others for success. So the opportunity for these companies to learn more about local partners in the countries that I flagged, as well as others, and develop the relationships and trust necessary to work together. If we can do that, I truly believe we can, then we will be successful. But as a couple of folks have already pointed out, it's understanding cultural differences and celebrating them, rather than trying to move ahead in the Canadian way. I'll just finish off by saying, as you know, during my diplomatic days, I served in Mexico, and I remember so often Canadian companies coming to the market interested in doing business there, but not fully appreciative of the fact that, you know, there are different cultures. Just getting together for an event or for lunch, for instance, as you know, Canadian companies think, oh, lunch, it must be at noon. In Mexico, lunch almost began at 2, and it might finish at 5 o'clock. So whenever I tried to arrange meetings for Canadian companies with good Mexican counterparts, and I would send an invitation, they would always come back and say, ¿qué hora es hora canadiense o hora mexicana? And so, you know, the fact that everybody understands there is this difference and has to be understood in order to do business in these countries, if we can make headway on that front, I think the prognosis for future Canada, Latin America trade and investment is huge.
Thank you very much, and that's really helpful, Mark. And I just wanted to comment on that. It is that the LAPD program has been in effect now for about 5 years, and you recognize the benefits of it and so on. And there's an expression, you can't make a friend when you need one. And so through COVID, we've had to, adjust and figure out how we work together, how we trade, how we create opportunities. Because we have these relationships, it's been extremely helpful to us. And as you just pointed out, there's huge opportunities here with respect to synergies and teaming up and so on. And I think it's important also to understand the cultural differences in a respectful way and understand where you're doing business. Are you doing it on Mexican time or is it Canadian time? And I think that if you are in the local environment, it has to be about the local environment and you bring your understanding and appreciation and so on. So we have one final question, and I know that we're fast approaching the end of our session, which has been absolutely terrific. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave. Dave, my last question for you and for the members of the panel is, what are the most significant security challenges that companies and their employees face and should consider and should understand when they think about doing business in Latin America?
Thanks, Michael. I think I'll focus this a little bit more on the difference between an expat traveling through the region versus in-country employees, and they're slightly different.
Sure.
And so, when you're referring to local or foreign nationals and where they reside versus an expat traveling through the region, I think a lot of companies, particularly those, Canadian, U.S., really they lose sight of the fact that the local nationals comprise the greatest portion of the victims and that are the victims of corruption and other things that happen in the region. And we're not blind to it. It happens in our own backyard. But many companies focus on their expat travel and don't take into account that their local national employees are exposed daily to threats and are much more likely to be victimized. So when a North American company is hiring somebody in country. So, and the reason I say that is they're really at a greater risk of extortion from some of the organized crime groups who, as I mentioned earlier, are going to try to often extort insiders to force complicity to help them carry out their illegal activities, the drug smuggling, or even sometimes just to seek kickbacks so that they're give them a permission to operate safely in the region. So, and I really want to highlight for those in the call that much of this goes unreported to the authorities, but also it goes very much underreported and not reported to the corporate entities and the headquarters, despite having ethics hotlines and all these things. And it's just important to emphasize that many of the local employees are very proud and has been articulated numerous times, very, very, very professional. And sometimes when these things happen, they're fearful of coming forward because they're embarrassed. And they're also fearful that if it's too risky to operate in that region, that they may lose employment or the factory may relocate. So, meanwhile, foreign nationals, we have to be cognizant of the fact that they attract a greater degree of attention from individuals. Often, as there's an assumption that somebody's traveling through the region, that there's an element of wealth associated with them. So. And our company at Crisis 24, we respond upon activation of special risk insurance policies, globally, but throughout Mexico, Latin America. Many of these things we respond to on a frequent basis. Unfortunately, are things like kidnap for ransom, express kidnap, extortion, robbery, and even missing persons. So, not to say that that's going to happen to your expats traveling through the region. They're much more likely to be victims of petty crime. But such as pickpocketing or purse snatching, but they may fall victim to a robbery or an express kidnap. And these criminals are usually armed and willing to use weapons without hesitation. So it's advised that if any of your expats traveling should comply and not offer any resistance. So what you can do to mitigate these risks, as I said before, it's just raising your situational awareness. And to provide some training for your employees traveling abroad. And then I would think, depending on how level of a high risk environment they're going into, every region, every state every city has some different implications, is that they should either have somebody in-house that's monitoring, but I would recommend that they would look for somebody that has some local area knowledge so that they can raise their situational awareness, help train them how to avoid common mistakes, and how to avoid the situation. So one of the greatest assets for any organization is awareness and information. So that's it. Thank you, Michael.
Well, thank you very much. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you very much. I think that's extremely important in terms of awareness. And I mean, if you're looking at investment or investing in opportunities in local economy, in international economy, one has to be aware. And the security concerns and travel threats and that type of situation is reflective on the need for planning and preparation and coordination and having a better sense of understanding of the local marketplace. It's extremely important. Gentlemen, I want to thank you all very much. Dave Fox, Mark Romanoff, Lucas Martinez, Rick Savoni, you as members of this panel have brought such wealth of information to us all this morning. And I want to thank all of those individuals who have joined us virtually today. Taking part in this session has been a tremendous wealth of information for myself. I can see that personally, but I'm hoping for you virtually that you've been able to garner some tremendous amount of information to help you with respect to your planning, your preparation, looking at the Latin American market. It's been stated that, look, we don't do enough business as Canadians in the Latin American marketplace, and it's so true, and I think that we have to change that, and that's part of what we were responding to with the LAPI initiative. And I think it's important working with the Consular Corps, garnering information, and working with the expert as well. Companies can thrive and survive. There's tremendous amount of Canadian know-how that we'd like to see exported, as well as opportunities from Latin America coming to Canada, because that was the basis of us creating LAPTI. It's not a one-sided trade situation. We want to create opportunities so that we want to make people's lives better. We've covered a lot of topics in the areas today and so on, and it's really important for us as a City of Toronto. A City of Toronto welcomes all of those of you who are on this virtual call today, and to continue to share with us your thoughts and ideas. And through the LAPTI program, directly with our economic development staff, we have some amazing people who work in this area. Team Toronto is front and center today, as they have been through the week with respect to the Toronto Global Forum. I want to congratulate Nicholas Remillard, Gilles Remillard, Joe Clark, and the team at the Global Forum for putting on an amazing conference. This second Toronto Partnership Symposium has been extremely helpful. It's enriched us with lots of information, and I'm hoping that this creates opportunities to create more engagement, to develop more business opportunities and so on, to create prosperity as companies look to get out of the pandemic and seek to grow and prosper, create jobs, create opportunities to make the lives of everyone better. Because at the end of the day, it's about social justice. It's about dealing with inequities that exist in the world and addressing some of the gaps that the COVID pandemic has been able to reveal to all of us. In order to do that, we need to create good jobs. We need to create tremendous collaboration with organizations. We have to ensure that the security risks that are of concern are addressed. And I think it's something that we've been able to achieve today with the information. So I want to thank you all very much for your participation. I wish you all a safe and healthy adventure as you move forward in terms of your next business expertise and expediting opportunities and so on. So thank you so much. And again, to our Team Toronto, thank you, team. All the best.